Welcome to Architectural series titled Architects Talk or Conversations with Architects, sponsored by Kalebodur'la. Today we have a very distinguished guest, Mr. Eric Owen Moss. He is a well-known architect, both in global scale and in Turkey as well. He's an award-winning architect. Mr. Moss, welcome to Turkey.
Nice to be here.
And welcome to the series.
Thank you for having me.
I want to thank you for your precious time being with us. I hope you will enjoy the series. You are coming from States, but especially from California.
Yes.
Which is quite different. I'm in LA. Because when we look from here, it is always associated with freedom and creativity. Yeah. It is one of the centers. I'm maybe racing with New York or something like that. And most of the architects, especially the young ones, think that it is a privilege to work in LA. I mean, the architects coming from LA are working in privileged conditions, like
yes.
Clients who are transparent to creativity. Your limits for the project are always larger or flexible than the usual, etc. Is it true? I mean, is it the case?
Los Angeles is a special city, but not necessarily for those reasons. If you think philosophically about whether the place where you live or your work, most of the time, determines who you are, it's one thing. If you think the people in the place determine what the work is, it's something else. So this is an old philosophical discussion. Does the environment determine the content of the work, or do the people who do the work determine the content of the work? And to be honest, I would say that there have been a few unusual people in Los Angeles. And my sense would be I would prefer to give credit to the individuals rather than the context in which they work. And those people have produced, I think, some special work in Los Angeles. And there may also be a factor that has to do with the nature of the city itself. And the nature of the city itself, in juxtaposition with a city like your city, like Istanbul, which has history going back thousands of years. Los Angeles, if it has a history at all, it's 20 minutes.
Yeah, and you were defining it as infant, as far as I remember. You use the word infant, comparing with Istanbul or Beijing
right.
or something.
Sure, it's a young city. It's a young city. So the Turkish architects who would like to work there should come there now, because I really think the future of Los Angeles is literally ahead of it, not behind it. And it's conceivable that a time would come when, you don't have to make a project next to Raphael's Palazzo in Los Angeles. There's no Raphael Palazzo. And therefore, the latitude to make different kinds of projects, or the obligations to pay attention to what's behind you, is not substantial, because there isn't a hell of a lot behind you anyway. Then it's up to the architect, and then you get some differences, but you get some unusual work too.
But you have to tackle with the problem of creating the context by yourself, maybe.
I think that's an interesting way to put it, because there's no a priori context that obligates you. Now, to be fair, there are all sorts of other kinds of pressures, probably not so different than yours. But I think, relatively speaking, Los Angeles would be a freer place to work than most major cities in the world. I think that's true.
But I again read somewhere that you said LA needed to stop worrying about emulating older, more traditional cities and embrace its fragmented nature, its ability to serve as an architectural laboratory. So it is also a kind of a alternative ground, a further chance.
It should be.
To try new things.
It should be, and in the hands of a few people, I think it is. And I think that also sets a precedent for other people who are coming now, coming younger architects. I think the point that I was making in that situation was that there are inevitably people who look around a little bit nervous, a little bit unsure, a little bit uncertain, and they see examples, Ringstrasse, Champs-Élysées, Rambla, Tiananmen Square, whatever it is, pieces of urbanity from historic cities that are famous, and they say, okay, we have to have one of those. We have to have our Champs-Élysées or something like that. And there have been, for instance, Wilshire Boulevard in Los Angeles, I think, there's a notion that it belongs to a kind of urban road where there are precedents around the world. So I think there are also pressures from people who want Los Angeles to grow up in a way that resembles other models in the world. I think this is difficult physiologically because of what Los Angeles is. Politically, there may be some constituency for that. So I think Los Angeles would be better, would be healthier if it acknowledged its opportunity to make things new and focused on that. I mean, they make a train through Los Angeles now. It's like a 19th century, it's not like Shanghai, Beijing train. It's a very slow train and follows a traditional train route, which was abandoned 50 years ago or something. So there are pressures to resemble models or precedents in other cities, which I think are not good pressures to respond to, but they exist in Los Angeles too.
Yes. But on the other hand, I mean, architecture in states in general, and of course LA, had a significant dominance in mainstream architecture. And as a student, when I was in university, we were educated with references to Frank Lloyd Wright, Flip Jansen, and many things that came from the new continent, I mean, as the modern architecture. And they were sometimes more dominant than, in terms of defining the contemporaneous, a sense of contemporaneous, they were more dominant than what we observe, what we see in our environment. So it is a kind of a, I mean, yes, there was no history or kind of a background, but I mean, there was a significant dominance in terms of, especially in modern architecture, coming from
I think
creating the heroes, for example. There was a capacity of continuously creating heroes, and it's a continuous case, I think.
I think America has a predilection in architecture for making heroes. I think we can do that. And you raise a very interesting point, particularly in the world today. I like the point, but maybe it's less an architecture discussion, more broadly a social and political discussion. What's America? What's America? And the architects you mentioned, Wright belongs to really probably to the 19th century, not even to the 20th century. Philip is another story, and conflating those two is a little bit complicated, because I think that for me their work means very different things. But I think Wright is an original American, a 19th century American. And the 19th century for America as a symbol to the world, to Europe and to Asia and to many places, as an opportunity which was a remarkable opportunity, that you could do things and make things and behave in a way that you probably couldn't do anywhere else in the world. I don't think that's entirely gone, but I think the perception of America in the world is somewhat different. Now, America in the world is not quite the same as American architecture in the world, which is not quite the same as Los Angeles architecture in America and the world. What I would say is, as an ideal, I think Los Angeles does have an opportunity in terms of heroes in architecture and making architecture new that was once a venue for America entirely. Mm-hmm. So I think Los Angeles has done that and continues to do that. And I think that's an important role that Los Angeles architecture can play. It's funny because I never thought of myself as an advocate for America per se, or an advocate for Los Angeles per se, or Los Angeles architecture. I'm probably an advocate for certain ideas or certain ways of thinking, and occasionally certain people, because I would say my collection of a few friends, maybe 5, 6 colleagues around the world, is a kind of metaphorical Los Angeles.
That's true.
And even though the people aren't always in Los Angeles, might be Pricks in Vienna, might be Stephen Hall in New York, might be Tom Main in LA. You know, a few of us who get together and then go away and don't see each other for 6 months, even though we talk. So that's my redefinition of what Los Angeles architecture could be. I wanted to say one other thing. Philip Johnson, and have to say was very.
He used a definition for you, like jewel of junkyard. Do you remember that?
Yeah, with the first book we did with Rizzoli, he wrote the introduction, and he was very friendly and very supportive, and we always appreciated his. Because in architecture, you're trying to do things and you look for friends, and sometimes everybody is making faces, and he was helpful. But he did something which I think is back to your question about Los Angeles as an original versus Los Angeles as being obligated to models that belong, let's say, to Europe. Mm-hmm. We don't know what to do, let's do something like that. And Hitchcock and Johnson made a very well-known exhibition, Museum of Modern Art, in 1929, bringing European conceptual ideas. Could be De Stijl, could be constructivism, could be the Bauhaus guys, could be the futurist guys, bringing it to America. But so this is already, in a certain way, a kind of definition of an inferiority complex. Mm-hmm. Do your own work. Let Santalia do his work. Let Eric Mendelsohn do his work. Let the Athens Charter guys, we'll do our work. I think Los Angeles is a little bit like that in a way, not obligating itself to conceptual, to intellectual, to theoretical models. Oh, they know how to do it? Let's do it like they did it. Over the Atlantic Ocean, into the Museum of Modern Art. Now everybody discusses this, and in a sense, it made America, at an intellectual level, I think, sympathetic to, and I don't know if the word is inferior, but we should do that. That's where the new ideas are coming from Europe. So in a certain sense, modernism in America was imported from Europe, but they stripped away. For instance, the constructivists had an ideological premise, a philosophical, a historical premise, futurists, so on and so on, Bauhaus too. It became a style in America. Mm-hmm. So whatever political ideologies and associations, which are quite fascinating, you know. So Moses Ginsburg working in Russia, or Le Corbusier borrowing from Moses Ginsburg, by the time it wound up as a house in America, all the ideology was dropped in the Atlantic Ocean, and it became a series of images. So this is interesting, you know, whether the images, what images belong to what politics is a discussion. But when America imports, America leaves behind the social and political context out of which these movements in the early 20th century originated. That's what Johnson did. He made it a style.
Thank you very much for being with us. I think we are just around the time. Would you like to add anything else?
Just that I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak to an audience in Istanbul and in Turkey. It's a really remarkable world for me. I wouldn't claim in any way to understand it, but I'm fascinated by it, and more Americans should come to understand that and appreciate it and learn from it, and also find a way to be in that discussion. It's an important place, and what you're doing in these discussions, I think, is helpful in that direction. So thank you very much.
We thank you. I mean, it was really a pleasure to be with you within this series. I'm going to give the link.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.